Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to what promises to be an absolutely fascinating session looking at arbitration from the perspective of in-house counsel. I'm Arabella Di Iorio. I run a small litigation practice here known as Aegon Litigation, and I've been a fellow of the Chartered Institute for over 25 years. Hopefully that doesn't tell you too much about my age. That's all I'm going to say about me, and in something of a departure from the norm, I'm going to ask our very distinguished panelists to say a few words about themselves, rather than making you all listen to me recite their very impressive bios. Those bios are on the conference website, so if you haven't had a look at them, I do recommend that you read them. It won't have escaped anyone that I have the challenge of two panelists with the same Christian name, but two different nationalities. And despite what I have to say has been some quite considerable practice, I have not been able to master what seemed to me at least to be some quite subtle differences in pronunciation. We're not in person, so I can't just rudely point to them. So I'm going to do my best, and I do ask their forgiveness in advance for torturing their names, as I am inevitably going to do. So I now warmly welcome, here goes, Maria Irene Perrucio, Sebastián Ribac, and Sebastián Partida, in that order. So I don't have to do it again for a few minutes. Can I ask you to deal with the first question, which I'm going to put to you? And that is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career? And in particular, what is it that led you to choose an in-house role, as opposed to, for example, private practice, academia, or indeed Hollywood stardom? Irene, I think you're the first.
Thank you very much. Well, funny enough, I think that the in-house role chose me rather than the other way around. But let me start from the beginning. I was very lucky. I had the opportunity to go through 3 of the 4 roles you mentioned. So I started in private practice with White & Case a good 8-9 years ago. For 4 years here in Paris in the arbitration team. Then I went to the ICC, so I tried the institution side of this game for 2.5 years, more or less. And then let's say that one of the old clients of White & Case proposed, why don't you join us for another adventure? And I gladly accepted, even though I miss very much my colleagues at the ICC and the professional experience over there. But I have to say this new role, I'm really enjoying it very much. So in the end, I started working in construction arbitration with Chris Seppala at White & Case. He was definitely my mentor, and I worked for a few years on the Panama Canal arbitration as an associate. Then I went to the ICC, could not touch the case, of course, because I was conflicted, but I saw a lot of construction. I reviewed, a lot of construction awards at the ICC, so it was extremely interesting. And it was quite natural to go work in-house for an Italian construction company, hoping to do some good for my country.
Thank you. I think, Sebastián, you're next.
Thank you very much. So I wasn't destined to work in arbitration because I studied French public law, which is everything but international. So I was a trainee in 2 major firms in PPP and PFI. And it wasn't really something for me. I then heard of international arbitration, things that was totally new to me while I was interning at Oric. And then I decided to try and to figure out something where I could work in international arbitration, but with something related to construction, because I was working a lot on a PPP project, and I really enjoyed the project aspect of it, not the financial aspect of it. And that's why I went to the UK to study for 2 years MS in construction law and disputes resolution at King's College. Once graduated, I came back to Paris and started in a law firm, an Egyptian law firm, but in their office in Paris. I stayed there for almost 4 years. Then I worked for Pinson Masons, which is one of the major players when it comes to construction arbitration. And I followed one of the partners who moved to Reed Smith, where I was still doing construction arbitration. And because my life changed and I had my first kid, I decided to have a more balanced lifestyle, and something that was, I think, impossible at this time for me while working in private practice. So I started to look for an opportunity to join a construction company to work on international disputes. And it was the right timing, because at this time, Bouygues Construction was looking for somebody to with international arbitration experience to avoid international arbitration. So basically, I was hired by Bouygues, and this was 3 years ago. And now I'm working on all the dispute aspects to try to avoid litigation and arbitration. And when it's not possible, I manage with external counsels our dispute in different jurisdictions.
Fascinating. Sebastián, how about you? I think you're still on mute. Great.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Arabella. Yeah. Sorry, I had a problem. I was pressing the button, but it didn't work. Thank you, Arabella, for the invitation, and thank you for the for all the organizers of this webinar. Regarding my personal background, contrary to my co-panelist, I started my career as in-house counsel, working in oil and gas company, the Total Group, where I managed arbitration proceedings for 3 years. It was more it was more a question of opportunity than really a choice at that time between an in-house role and private practice, actually. After the 3 years at Total, I worked in a law firm and also at the university as assistant professor in order to complete my PhD. These two positions, they were very interesting. But after completing my PhD, all I wanted, my first decision was to go back to work as in-house counsel, since it had been my favorite professional experience, and because I had really appreciated the proximity the proximity with the business that offer you I mean, it's a proximity that you can only have with when you serve as corporate counsel. So for me, it was really important to have this proximity with business, and so that's why after working in law firm and at university, I went back to the corporate world, and I'm really glad of that. I think it was a good choice.
That sounds fascinating as well. So don't put your mute button back on, because that avoids me having to say your name again, but I can ask you the next question. And this is the only question which contains the ghastly word COVID. So I'm going to ask it and get it out of the way so we don't have to mention it again. Just in a few words, how has it impacted your working life? Are you still at home? What is it you miss about the office, if you are? How's it affected you?
Well, yes, I'm working almost fully remotely now, but of course, I wouldn't say that COVID has impacted my work life in a positive way. However, I think that from my perspective as a tax professional, I think the restrictions imposed by the pandemic have had some positive effect, such as the generalization of remote work, which can be very positive for personal work-life balance. Also, another positive effect, I think, is that people finally realized that there was this digital revolution that was on the way, and with all its implication that is it has on the economy, the protection of their data. And I think it's really important that people and companies now realize that their data have value and they have to protect it and to value it. Another positive aspect is positive aspect of the COVID. I think that lawyers discovered that new and efficient ways to render justice were available and or in development. I'm of course talking about the virtual hearings that you all heard about, but which are, I think, really very cost efficient from my in-house concept perspective. And I think it's really a revolution for arbitration to have this possibility to avoid long travel with all the expenses in hotels and hearing centers. That can be very important. And yeah, I think that was one of the positive aspects of the COVID.
And Irene, has it been positive for you as well, or perhaps less so? What are your views?
Well, I'm certainly traveling much less than before, but if I have to be honest, certainly this has done some good to the company's cash, because of course means less expenses for the company. I would say, jokes aside, but also for the lawyers, not for myself, of course. I would say that it's interesting, because I had the impression before that whenever we had to organize a meeting with my colleagues, where 70,000 people's company was quite massive, you had to literally run after people, knocking on doors, trying to get people together. Whereas now, with just a link on Teams, you can organize calls on very different time zones, and everyone just connects. And I have the impression that things got faster. In the good sense. Now we can travel for holidays, so why not? And jokes aside, from a professional point of view, I would say that to me it didn't change that much, because since I'm managing international disputes, in any case, the colleagues I had to work with would in any case be abroad, not in Milan. So I would still talk to them a lot via video conference call, etc. I think just people got used to meet in person a little bit less, or limited to what is necessary. For example, if we have to deal with a negotiation with a difficult client, of course, we will go personally, now that we can travel, of course, not before. But even just the procedural hearings, for example, we do them online, and it's much less cost for the company, and still, I would say, equally efficient. I would say that main hearings with cross-examination, etc., I still hope that will be in person next year. But I think in the end, it's not a bad development. I welcome it with quite a good attitude.
Great. And Sébastien, what about you? And perhaps just, I said I wouldn't ask more than one question on it, but if you've got a team where you are, do you think that there are possibly some negative aspects in training junior people who have been less exposed possibly to sort of in-house discussions, and being able to catch up with somebody by the water cooler and ask what they might think is a stupid question that they don't necessarily want to ask over a Zoom link, or do you think that's being overdone, and actually it's as positive for you as it has been for Irene and Sebastián?
I think that it has several positive aspects that were I think that all of them have been described and listed by Maria Irene and Sebastián. For me, there is one downside of it, is that I'm working a lot on written submissions, and like Maria Irene, I have all my work is done on international dispute, because I'm working for Bouygues Bâtiment International, which means that I handle all the cases that are outside of Europe. And we realized that when you are working on written submissions and you need to meet, and it's very technical construction. So when we need to meet with engineers, with financial people, with planners, and all these type of people, they are always working on sites. It's people, mainly the engineers. Their job is to build things, and it's much harder to get a hold of them. And compared to when I could travel much more, they had to set in their agenda, to fix some meeting with me. So they would, take 2 or 3 days out of their very busy schedule to spend time with me in a room. And I could draft, for example, a statement of claim or a statement of defense or this type of things in 1 or 2 weeks. So I could spend only 1 or 2 weeks in a different place. And all the energy was geared toward having this done as quickly as possible. Now it can take months to do the same work because they are still working on sites. It's very harder. Basically, they work during their free time if they have any, and they're working 6 days a week, or during the nights they have other things to do. So it's very much more complicated to get their focus and to have them, spending time on their claim because it's not their main business. So I would say that's one of the downside of COVID. And also our team has been hiring a few junior lawyers. And since now we are working 3 days a week on site, I think it's a little bit harder for them to know the people, understand the business, and to get in touch with everybody. When you have experience and you know your team and you know how the business or your company works, it doesn't, for me, COVID has had a very positive aspect because all the time you spend, driving to your workplace, now it can be spent on working directly, and you can start earlier and basically spending more effort in your work. But for junior people, I think it's a little bit harder because they don't know who they should call or contact. They don't really know how to interact with the people they don't know. And basically, even if you can put a face on the name, it's still a virtual face. And I believe that for them, it will take maybe the double of time to get used to their new environment, which is not ideal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the same in private practice as well. Can we sort of shift a little into actual sort of dispute resolution, and maybe just talk about if you have a choice over whether to litigate or to arbitrate. And I appreciate this is an arbitration conference, but you can say that you prefer litigation. What are the key factors that influence your choice? And I think, Sebastián, if I can start with you.
There are some key factors that we would consider. The first one is whether I have the choice between unknown and arbitration institution, or with a bad or no track record. In that case, I think it's better to go to court. It also depends in which country you are. It depends on what is the entity you are in litigation with. For example, I wouldn't go to court in some countries where basically our client is a public entity, because that would be a lost cause. In that case, arbitration might be better. In some countries, for example, if you go to the US, we don't like to have a jury trial, in particular in construction, because for us it's technical and we don't really understand, because jury are not technical people most of the time, and we don't think that they are the right choice to being able to judge basically technical aspects. So in that case, we would strongly advocate to have an arbitration institution. In particular, in the US, you have 2 or 3 very famous institutions. if we can. So basically, there are a lot of factors that we need to consider. To summarize the entity we are litigating with, the track records of both the courts and tribunals and of the arbitration institution. And also when it comes to arbitration institution, whether we have a real choice in the arbitrators. If it's a roster of arbitrators where basically we cannot choose people outside of this roster, we don't really like it. In particular, when you go to some countries where you have only, and I'm not saying that they are not good, but where you have only QCs or retired judges, basically it's the same as having a court litigation, but more expensive. So there are many factors that we are considering, and it's very hard to give you one simple answer.
That's great. I'm not after one simple answer. The more complicated, the better. Sebastián, what about you?
Yeah, I fully agree with Sebastian's analysis. I basically have the same key factors as he has, but I must say that contrary to the construction sector, the tech industry has been less exposed. I mean, arbitration has not been very used until now. For many reasons, but one of them is that there are cultural reasons that has the main companies in the sector are American companies, and they only consider arbitration as an option of last resort, reserved to big money disputes and to international disputes, and it can also be explained by the strong dependence of the tech companies on each other, and the strong collaborative spirit that make them always prefer negotiation over arbitration and litigation. This is something that it is very, I mean, when you're a litigator, it's always very fascinating to discover that world. And personally, I think it's an approach. I find this approach quite reasonable, and it will be difficult to make the use of arbitration systematic in this in my industry, simply because there are not enough competent arbitrators in this field for the moment. So it's really difficult to say, well, let's go to arbitration. We won't have the right arbitrator, but let's try it. It's really difficult. It's not the same thing like in the oil and gas or like in construction, where you say that you have many very competent, very decent arbitrators. So we have this big problem. And however, I would always favor arbitration, even in my company, which is a tech company, when I seek discretion. For example, for M&A disputes, because when disputes arise after an acquisition or after a spin-off, it remains always internal matters for companies. So it's really important to keep it discreet. I would also prefer arbitration, of course, for international transaction, as you all know, as we all know, the neutrality of arbitration is probably the most important key factor. And of course, I will also privilege arbitration for big project disputes, simply because when tens of millions or more are at stake, you just cannot afford to spend years in courts, as we have done. I mean, we had this huge dispute at Hewlett-Packard that lasted over 15 years before the Californian courts, and it was, of course, too much time before the courts. At the end, we finally won, but I mean, it's not the most cost efficient, the most time efficient way to deal with dispute, I think.
And just picking up on what you've said about your industry really preferring to negotiate. possibly because you're waiting for the new generation of tech savvy people to come along. Those negotiations, would you be involved in those? Would they be done at high level, and would you bring in outside counsel for those, or not really?
It depends. No, not really. I mean, in my own experience, not really. But as in-house counsel, we are involved, of course, from the beginning of the negotiation. But I mean, I don't have an example of negotiation where we were assisted by external counsel. I don't have any. No. Like, this is really something. There is this cooperative spirit which is very strong in my industry, and and also the difference with construction or the energy sector is that we don't have so much big projects. I mean, we don't have in the construction industry, when you build roads, etc., it's always a question of billions of dollars or euros. In the IT industry, it's more like a few millions. Of course, it's a lot of money, but it's not that much to enroll an external counsel. It's so that's why we're more cautious about recourse to arbitration.
And Maria Irene, you're in construction. Do you collaborate a lot, or are you at daggers drawn?
Collaborate only in the negotiations, you're asking? It really depends on the case. It's so case by case specific. I had cases where the operations preferred to deal with the negotiations alone, and I had cases where actually we had our external lawyers going physically with them and traveling to assist to the negotiation with a client. Usually, as big negotiations are on the constructor client level, not constructor subcontractor. That's quite easier to manage. But in general, if I may take a step back on the arbitration versus litigation, I have the luck of seeing both, because I have my scope of work encompasses both international litigation and arbitration. And honestly, the point is that we are constructor, and our clients most of the time are state entities. It's not easy to negotiate the contract with them. Some of them make very, very clear since the beginning during the tender that the state court's clause is not negotiable. So what do? You have to go for it. If you want to get the job, you take the contract as it is with a state court litigation clause. Let's say that we most of the time we try to negotiate an arbitration clause. So yes, we definitely prefer it. If it's FIDIC, even better, because you have the escalation through employer's determination, DAB, and arbitration. But why is it important? Of course, not because it's fancy or because of any other reason. It's just that it's particularly advantageous for the construction industry, I would say, because first of all, it's faster than state court litigation, and time is of the essence for a construction project. That's why DAB were invented, right? To continue having cash flow going in the right direction, well, towards the constructor, at least, I would say. And then, yeah, whatever, if you don't agree, if you issue the dissatisfaction, you go to arbitration. But that's the point, that the cash flow needs to continue flowing to get the project to the end. Otherwise, it's impossible to finish the work. Awards circulate within your convention. We all know that. So when we win, it's easier to to enforce it, or at least to negotiate a spontaneous compliance on the other side. It's private, of course, that was mentioned already. Our group is on the stock exchange, so of course, if the proceedings is private, we can decide when the news get out and how to prepare for it. And trust me, I have a group of analysts on my back that every time asking, when is the work coming out, we need to bring it. Okay, so that's absolutely relevant. And of course, we can choose our judges, not because we like them, but because they have experience in the industry. And being construction, like energy, I would say, that's what I know. I started in energy arbitration, then I switched to construction. The industry is highly technical. So I would like my arbitrator to understand when my expert tries to explain a delay analysis, or tries to explain what critical path is and how it has been impacted by the client and not by us, etc., etc. Procedure is flexible, so that for me is the most important. But boiling it down to the very core of this trade-off for me is, as I was saying at the beginning, our clients are state-owned entities. So try to go litigate in front of the state courts of whatever country that has let's say a peculiar tendency against a state entity. It's really difficult, because certain courts in certain geographical areas tends to be very protective towards the state entities, i.e. quite biased against constructors, and us in particular. So at least arbitration provides for a neutral forum. So that's our view on the issue.
No, a very sound one. Now, I know the next question and the next few questions are going to be very popular with lawyers in the audience who are outside counsel. We absolutely love being told what we do right. We don't particularly love being told what we do wrong, but we go away with every good intention to sort that out. Irene, maybe just starting with you, and it's a very wide question, but and obviously I anticipate you're going to say that some construction expertise would be critical. But what sort of a skill set do you look for in your outside counsel? I mean, is that sort of technical ability really what you focus on exclusively? And if not, what else is there?
No, it's a good point. Certainly knowledge of the industry. Yes, I'm sorry. I prefer to be boring, but that's
Not at all.
That's the truth. The first thing when I have to select an external lawyer that my general counsel asks me is like, do they have a sound construction in practice? Like, yes, don't worry, I checked that. So yes, no, of course, that's what everyone is concerned about in the company. Honestly, then, of course, we work all over the world. We have disputes all over the world. Cheers to that. So we need also some local knowledge. Sometimes, of course, we put up teams of counsel, like leading counsel and co-counsel. That really depends on the country and the dimension of the project, etc. It is, to me, it also depends on the case, right? If it's a commercial case, I would go for a law firm that has strong construction practice and commercial arbitration practice. If it's a mere investment arbitration, of course, and we have some, the profile of the law firm is going to be different. It's not that much the construction background that is so important, even though, of course, like, it's more than welcome. But then we shift the focus on some other aspects, on the knowledge of public international law, exit experience, etc. So it really depends. It really depends. And then in terms of skills, I would say sometimes dimension, because we have certain massive cases that cannot be dealt with by a 10-people team. So that's why sometimes we go with a massive war machines. And I've been in one of them right at the beginning of my career. And yeah, we're 30 lawyers working on cases, if not more, across offices. And it was necessary. It was physically necessary, especially if you have a global claim, as we had in one of my first cases. You need a ton amount of people working all together, extensive amount of hours during the day on the case. So sometimes, even though you would prefer that specific boutique where they're doing an excellent job, but either you support them with a bigger machine, or they would not be able in 4 or 5 people to deal with a 5 billion. It's not even the amount in dispute, it's just the dimension of the case. Yes, yeah. Exactly. So I would say that.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear you have a spot out there for little boutiques. Sebastián, do you agree with what Irene has said, or do you have a different perspective?
Yeah, I would be boring as well, but I think that like all in-house counsel, we expect from our external counsel to have a minimum knowledge of our industry. This is actually critical, as you said, especially when it comes to assisting us in resolving commercial disputes. However, lawyers remain lawyers, and you cannot accept from an external counsel to have technical skills that you don't have yourself. As an in-house counsel, our job is to make the bridge between the law and the business, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind. So yeah, I mean, it should. I mean, it's kind of normal if you as an in-house counsel, you better know the industry than your external counsel. I mean, this is totally normal. So that's why I said you cannot expect them from the external counsel to have more knowledge on that. But regarding the main skills that I expect from external counsel, I would say that. Of course, I would say that I expect from them to be excellent lawyers. Of course, very good lawyers. It may sound obvious, but I think it's really important to recall it, because it's really something that is important to have someone that have a lot of knowledge in contract law. This is basic, but it's fundamental, I think. Another point, another skill important is reactivity. Reactivity, to have an external concept that is reactive, it can change everything. As Irene was saying, time is everything, so the reactivity is really something important to me. And another skill, I think, is to have a good team spirit. I like when I have when I work with an external counsel that for the moment that we share, that we resolve together a dispute, we are part of the same team, and I think this is something that is really important in order to have a good resolution of the dispute.
Yes, and Sébastien, anything to add to that list?
It's very difficult to add to this very comprehensive list, but I would add maybe 3 or 4 points. What we like is, so it's the same as Maya, Irene, and Sebastian. When we have a big dispute or arbitration, we will go for a big law firm. But when it's not the case, we really like to work with boutique or maybe underdog, because we know that the partner with the partner in charge, we will really be working on the case, which is not definitely the case in big law firms, where basically they are more rainmaker than spending time on the case, and we are very sensitive to that. We also like lawyers who, because we work on different legal markets, who really know their markets, because this can make a huge difference, because they know what should be done, the way it should be done, to ensure that our case will be presented in the best way. And what I really appreciate is that when you have a lawyer who is able to understand what we really want, and who is able to think outside of the box and can be very creative to get it. Because, for example, we'll say, okay, we want to start arbitration because we have been negotiating. There was this escalation procedure, multi-tier arbitration, and this type of different clause. And we will say, but have you tried that? In my experience on this market, it worked like that. So, and have you tried? And this guy, for example, let's go to mediation. And I know a very good mediator. And okay, I know also these people. And I think that we can, you could save money and you could try something different from what you have in mind. And when they are able to come and offer something that was not considered internally, it's very appreciated, in particular when it's successful. So
that's your respective wish lists. So can I flip your wish lists over and ask you for some war stories, please? So perhaps you can each give me, and I'm going to start with Sebastián, two or three things about external counsel. Don't name names unless you want to, that most irritate you.
This is very, very embarrassing, actually. It's quite controversial, but I can give you maybe 2 examples of from 2 recent experiences. First example that I have in mind, it's something that really irritates me. I really don't like when I receive an invoice from a large law firm, and it shows that the hours of a junior associate or intern has been billed the same amount as a partner from a smaller law firms. You know, this is quite common, but it's always very disappointing, you know, to see that the intern bills you the same thing that what a partner could bill you. You know, it's always irritating, even if I mean the intention is good. You know, they want to be transparent, but I think it's not. It's definitely, it doesn't really reflect well on the law firm, I think. And another unpleasant thing is when some external counsels are overconfident, even arrogant, and seem to want to demonstrate that they know the issues better than the client, whether regarding the merits or the proceedings. I find this is counterproductive, and even though it is about a service provider-client relationship, I think it's really important to always have a relationship based on equality between in-house and external counsels. For me, this is really important.
Maria Irene, so we've heard about bidding and overconfidence. What are your pet hates?
Oh, I have a long story. A long list, sorry. So let's pick the top three. I'm very disappointed when I see that the lawyers don't have knowledge of the procedural rules. So it happened to me with the same law firm that they almost made 3 procedural mistakes under the ICC rules. And I mean, they're unlucky, because one thing that I know now after 2.5 years is the ICC rules more or less by heart, because after 2.5 years, you know, things get stuck in your brain. So that was a bit disappointing, I have to say, because I have a number of cases to manage, and I don't have to catch at the last moment a letter that was sent out, was about to be sent out with a decent blatant mistake in it. Not just for the mistake, let's say, oh, a different article number, like, no, asking the other party authorization to amend the terms of reference when the terms of reference was not signed. And this is unacceptable for me, especially if you're litigating very, very harshly with the other party. Yeah. So that's why, of course, it puts you in a very bad position in the case, because anyhow, it's gone, saved, didn't happen, so all good. I like precision in deadlines. For example, what happened a few days ago is that a firm sent me a draft review. I asked, listen, is there that local jurisdiction that I do not know? Is there a deadline to send this out to the court? No deadline. Very good. Then it was 10 p.m. I said, I will review it tomorrow. Then suddenly someone remembered that the deadline was the same day. So at midnight, they called the general counsel, midnight. And the general counsel woke up, reviewed that, sent his comment at 1 a.m. I just realized the morning after, unfortunately, because lucky me, I was leaving. And then 2 p.m. the day after, the same counsel again asking, so is this okay? Can we send it out? Like, you woke up the general counsel at midnight to get comments after having told us there was no deadline, and now you didn't send it yet. So that was quite upsetting. And concision, I would say, when I see memos of, I don't know, 30, 35 pages without even an introduction or executive summary, an index, a conclusion, that's a bit unusable, I would say. Like, the ratio that I always try to use is that I can read up to 10 pages. My general counsel can read 1 paragraph. The CEO can read 1 line, and that's it. So I think the law firms, external lawyers should remember this kind of ratio to escalate concepts and decisions up there. So I think if these aspects are avoided, we're generally happy with our.
I think it's quite difficult. You know, some people feel, you know, they've done hours and hours of work, and they want you to know that they've done hours and hours of work, and that results in the 30-page memo.
Yeah, but at the end you have to use it, right?
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Or what sometimes, sorry, just last one, when they ask me, okay, shall we add this paragraph or not? I don't know. You tell me what are the pros and cons, and then I'll tell you yes or no. anyhow, but it doesn't happen very, very, very often, I have to say.
That's good to hear. Sebastián, anything to add to those terrible tales?
Okay, so for me, the first thing is overcharging.
Yeah.
Because when we go to different countries, what we try to build is a sound business relationship with the selected law firms. And very recently, a law firm that helped us to secure a good result in an arbitration. We were considering to instruct them to have the award, to get the award in force. And so I asked them, because I like to work with cap or with lump sum, because we can have too many surprises after that. And for reporting reason, it's also better. And so I asked to have a lump sum, and we realized that they were asking us 3 times what other law firms of the same level were asking, when the other law firms didn't even know the case because they didn't work on the arbitration. So I had a serious conversation with the managing partner who tried to give me some very lame explanation. And he agreed to divide by 3, basically as a lump sum, to offer the same lump sum as the other were offering. So that's the first thing. Also, when I realized, when I'm reviewing, the bill, that I've been billed 20 minutes for one of the lawyers sending me a New Year's greeting email. Basically, he was sending me a Happy New Year, Sebastián, and I realized that he billed me 20 minutes for that. So this type of thing is, I think that was the worst. You also have law firms, and even some of the law firms who are very famous on the market, who fail to reply to the question that is asked to them. So basically, they will send you a 30 pages report signed by 3 partners from Paris and London, and reading the report, you realize that you have half a page responding to your question, and they are charging you a lot of money, and you are just saying, that's not what my email was very clear. We had a conference call for that, so we are not going to pay for 30 pages where just half a page is relevant to the question, and you haven't responded to most of the question we were asking you. You also have law firms where basically you ask question and they reply 3 days later. So maybe because I've been working in private practice in Paris, where basically if you don't reply in the next hour, your client can get sometimes a little bit annoyed. And in some very developed countries with in North America, so you have 3 countries in North America, I won't mention which one, but we are used to having lawyers who are replying 2 or 3 days after the question, and sometimes it's urgent because we need it, for a management meeting, and they are always saying, sorry for this late answer. So I don't get it. You have lawyers who do not know the case or even the names of the parties. So I arrived in arbitration where basically you had the main lawyer who was supposed to know the case. Basically, I realized that he got all the facts wrong, and he was calling me by a name which was not my name. And we've been exchanging, and we were exchanging for 2 years. And I say, but who was replying to the email you are calling me? I'm not this guy. I'm Sebastián Ribac. So I don't get, who are you talking to? And he was, I'm very sorry. I was confused with somebody else. How can you, on the day of the arbitration, and also when he was asking, and who is this guy? This guy is our witness. So how can't you know that he's our witness? So I have a lot of basically, and maybe the last thing is when we receive from lawyers, a little bit like Irene, but a little bit different, where lawyers are sending us their written statements, written submission, and they ask us, it may be 40, 50 pages. So they send it at 6 p.m. and ask us whether we could come with our comment and review everything by tomorrow morning. And I think they are taking it the other way around. Basically, Counsel, I need to review it. I need to ask the question to the people who know about the case, who are working, on site. I need to get the go-ahead on some maybe strategic points, whether we want to have them included with the management. So basically, to send it very late and to expect to have everything within 12 hours, for me, it's that they don't understand how it works, you know, in major construction or major companies. And also it's not what is expected, because it's litigation. It's not like where you are negotiating to sign a contract, where basically you have, the time is very limited. In litigation, you have months to prepare. So you cannot say that you have been preparing. That means that you have been preparing maybe 3 or 4 days before your submission is due. And this is not really acceptable.
Well, I hope there's no one in the audience thinking that was me. And I hope there's lots of people in the audience thinking, oh, I've never been that bad. Can we cheer ourselves up, please? So can I ask you to describe a situation in which external counsel actually did impress you, did do a fantastic job, and why that was? Irene, can I start with you?
Yeah, certainly. I would say that let's say that I kind of give for granted respecting procedural deadline, knowing the case and knowing the procedural rules. By the way, fun realization, when I was at White & Case being an associate, I was freaking out for typos. Now that I'm on the other side, even if there are 1 or 2 typos in the email, nothing is going to happen. I just realized that switching side, that it's not that much of a big deal. Anyhow, no, it's typos, jokes apart. I think that for me, the most impressive thing is when let's say we have a difficult situation where on the balance, we are in a more difficult situation than the other party, being in the client or the subcontractor. This is like a generical situation. And with the assistance of the counsel and its strategy, which is the most important part that you do not learn on the books and it's not written in any procedure, right? With its strategy, little by little, step after step, you improve your situation that much that you might end up even concluding a settlement agreement that in the end, even though I, of course, like arbitration litigation is all fun and game for us, but a settlement which has a certain result for a company, it's always much better, let's be honest. So I'm impressed when the external counsel provides for a strategy, thinking out of the box, it was already mentioned, being creative, a strategy that letter after letter, exchange after exchange, manages to switch the balance of the position between the parties so that we ended up being in a much better position than opposing party. And we end up, if not winning or dismissing the claim, but at least having a settlement agreement that would have been much better than losing a case in court or in arbitration. But it's difficult to explain without giving names and parties, so I have to be a bit careful. But I hope I described the situation.
Yes, I mean, moving from the back foot more to the front foot is perhaps what you're getting at, which is obviously a role that your external counsel should be embracing. Sebastián, what about you? Anyone's impressed you?
Yeah, no, you know, I don't have a precise illustration, but I think it's in general. I think what's really important is to have a high level of trust with in the external counsel. I mean, trust is everything with your external counsel, and once you have that, it's would make a difference. And I'm always impressed by competence. I mean, hard skills and soft skills, of course, and particularly with I'm impressed by you know, sometimes the humility, the sobriety, the humility of some counsel that are very impressive in hearings, in the way they draft their memos and memoranda, etc. But they always keep, you know, they're always calm, very humble, and this is something that I really appreciate, and I think it can be very impressive to see that, you know, to have someone who is very skilled, but at the same time very cool, you know, very, you know, I just did my job and that's it. And this is what impresses me the most, I think.
And Sebastián, what about you?
I've been impressed a few times by lawyers who went the extra mile. You know, when, for example, recently we were in a situation negotiating with a client in Nigeria. The situation was very tense and very, very difficult. We thought that we would have to start a dispute, and we are not happy about this possibility because it would have been a very difficult battle. And we decided to retain a law firm, and the partner came and thought out of the box and told us, look, before doing that, let's try to do this. And I think that this could unlock the situation. At the end of the day, we had a deal. We signed a settlement agreement. The amount we got was not exactly what we wanted, but was made certainly much better than what it could have been. And everything went smoothly when we spent months, if not maybe almost a year and a half, negotiating, having other lawyers giving us legal opinion to try to get a very strong position and starting to get aggressive. And this guy arrived, and basically all the tension, I wouldn't say disappeared, but we were able to talk to people, and our client was basically the head of our client was somebody with a very high opinion of himself, and it was very difficult to talk to him. He was shouting all the time. It was impossible to have a normal conversation with him. And this lawyer arrived, and we could have a conversation because he designed a strategy that nobody, no other law firms basically offered or suggested. And with that, we could get much more than what was expected at this time.
Good people skills and thinking outside the box. We're getting to the end, and I wanted to leave just a little bit of time for questions and answers. So I'm going to ask my final question, which is, if you had to give just one tip to a young arbitration professional who was thinking about working in-house but hadn't made their minds up, what would it be? Sebastian, can I start with you?
I think that first of all, the first question is whether he wants to keep working only on international arbitration. And what he likes in international arbitration. If it's pleading and cross-examination, he should definitely not go in-house. He should stay, you know, in private practice. But if he can find, it's very hard to find companies with a position in relation to international arbitration, but one, he can find one. He can basically, he will be the one designing in his own role. It's very, it will work on strategic aspects that you don't really see in law firms because you discuss with the financial and management people. You will have a better understanding of your industry, whether it's IT or technology or construction or oil and gas. I've been traveling much more since I'm in-house lawyer than when I was in private practice. I'm discussing with very interesting people, but not only legal people, which is just amazing. I'm learning every day. So if you want to learn new things about the industry, because every time I'm talking with a planner, with an engineer, commercial people, I'm learning all the time more about what I would say real life outside of the legal life is, and also I was afraid that my job would be maybe a little bit more boring, but it's totally the opposite. I've never had so much fun, and I've never learned so much since I've joined my company.
Wow, well, I should think you're going to get about 100 CVs in the next 10 minutes. Sebastian, what about you?
Yeah, you know, I would give exactly the same tips than those that Sebastian just gave. When you decide to go in-house, as a when you work as a young arbitration professional, you have to be sure that you don't want to dedicate yourself only to arbitration, because as Sebastian mentioned, working in-house requires skills in many different fields. But even if some corporate counsel are specialized in dispute resolution, I mean, you never do you never only work on arbitration when you work in-house. So this is something that is that you have to keep in mind when you choose to make that move. And I would say to young practitioners who want to go in-house that just don't be afraid to step away from pure law, as you can touch it in law firms, because when you enter the corporate world, you discover the business life, and it's very concrete, you know, and I think it's even more exciting, even if sometimes we heard that being just a support function can be boring, etc., because you're not in the core business of your company. I think it's not totally true, because as Sebastian said, you have a lot of fun. You know, you discover new things, new jobs. You know, because all you interact with colleagues that don't make the same job as yours. So I think it's really it's something really exciting and very interesting. And I would promote in-house concept. The in-house concept job, because I think it's really a good one.
Irene, can you make it sound even better than they already have?
Well, first of all, I want to find a fool who went around saying that in-house counsel work less than private practice counsel, because that's definitely not true. No, jokes aside, it's a very, very fun job. I really enjoy it. I love it. It's extremely interesting, and one learns a lot. When I joined the company, I had the impression I was doing an LLM on construction law at like full light speed, and it's incredibly interesting and nourishing. I would say that if I have to give one tip, no, one is not sufficient. Sorry, I will take a little bit more time. A few tips for young professionals. For example, for me, the passage through the ICC helped me a lot to adapt to the in-house counsel life, because at the ICC I had to manage up to 90 cases alone, and of course much less. The management was much less than what I'm doing now. But I learned to jump from one matter to the other very quickly and multiple times during the day. Whereas when I was an associate at White & Case, I would sit down with my brief for 12 hours in a row and just think about it. I had 4 or 5 cases at the same time, maximum, not more than that. So learn to be very, very flexible and manage different things at the same time, and jump from one matter to the other with a snap of your fingers. Learn how to manage things. Because when you're a young associate, especially as I was, you more or less implement strategies and instructions that come from upside. Now I'm in a very nice position where my general counsel trusts me very much. I'm very grateful for that. It gives me a lot of freedom, but it also means I have a lot of responsibility, and I need to sometimes find the answer by myself. I cannot ask him every single time I have to send an email or take a minor decision. That would be useless for him. I would probably fire me tomorrow morning, knowing the amount of work he has, and it would be for good cause, for sure. So learn to be independent is very, very important. And as was said before, being creative, because I don't want to say that being a counsel in a law firm is easy, but more or less, like, the structure is what it is. Yeah, interns, paralegals, interns, associates, counsel, law partners. You know what you have to do. You research, you interview people, you prepare the witness statement, the expert report, put everything together, draft it, send to the tribunal, more or less. Here it's much more difficult. It's a huge ocean of different problems that comes to you from all the different departments, all the different angles, and every time you have to find a solution, right? That's our job. We have to find solution for the company's problems. It's the worst department in a company, remember that. And also you have to learn to manage a lot of things at the same time quickly. I called a dear friend of mine who left Dentons here in Paris to join a big construction company in Italy. And I asked him, listen, how is it going to be for me? What do I have to expect? And he told me, you will have required to take decision very fast on a basis of limited information, and you have to do the best that you can. So it was very difficult for me, being quite an OCD perfectionist. That's what White and Case made me, to being less always. I try to be as precise as I can, but you cannot have the same level of precision as an in-house counsel. You have to rely a lot on what the external lawyers give you, and learn to give, for example, the top level review also on drafts, because my instinct would be to sit down with this 700-page draft and review it all, and I can't. I could not, not even if I worked for 24 hours per day. So yeah, you have to change your mindset. But I think I grew a lot personally and professionally with this new job, and I think it's extremely challenging in a positive way. So if you have the occasion to do it, just go for it, because it's absolutely amazing.
Well, you've absolutely sold it, and it's a bit depressing that the question says if you had a tip to give to a young arbitration professional, because that means doesn't apply to me. We've had one question come in, and I think we've just got time to deal with it. I don't know whether you can see the question, but let me read it out. And it was actually, if we'd been a lot faster, it was on my reserve list. So this is a question from the audience. Every time I ask a question about diversity and efforts to satisfy diversity concerns, in particular ethnicity and diversity, I receive the same generic response, i.e. we prepare a list of potential arbitrators or counsel that include diverse profiles. This continues to beg the question. As you can appreciate, we are still lagging in appointments of arbitrators and counsel that represent ethnic diversity in international arbitration. The institutions are trying very hard, but parties are perceived not to be doing enough. Once you are in possession of a list of competent professionals, including ones that satisfy diversity, can you describe the decision process to select a candidate? Who would like to take that? It's a bit of a long question, but I think it comes down to the decision-making process and the part that diversity actually plays in that.
I will start on that. So I will answer in two times. If you take, for example, I don't know already how it works, the ICC, how they select the arbitrators, and I don't really know how it's done with the French parties, even if I'm in France. But in France, when we speak about diversity, it's more about gender diversity. It's I've never really seen anything about ethnic diversity, which is also one of the main concerns, because in the arbitration world, and when I was in arbitration and in arbitration law firms, you don't really have let's say a diverse group. So you had groups that were created for like women arbitration, which is a great initiative, but you don't have an equivalent for people of color or various background, which is quite disappointing, to be honest, because it's I haven't seen a lot of diversity, so I don't know how to answer that. For us, it's different at Bouygues, because since what I was saying is that we work on almost all the continents, and when we select arbitrators, we don't really have question of diversity, because when we are in Nigeria, we will choose Nigerian, mostly Nigerian arbitrators. When we are in Ivory Coast, it's the same. When we go to Australia, and you need to rely heavily also on your domestic or on your external counsel, and you will have maybe one in your own country, but most of the time we are working with legal counsel in the country we are working in. So the question of diversity is less important, because we work with diverse arbitrators, but because we are working with people from the market. We are not going, for example, when we have a dispute in Ivory Coast, in Nigeria, or in Myanmar, we are not going to look for a French qualified lawyer or a QC or this type of things, which doesn't make any sense to us. After the question, I think it's very important, and I cannot answer because I'm not seeing real improvements in the panel of arbitrators that the main institution. The real improvement I see it for women, which is just amazing, and I would also love to see the same for a minority.
Yeah, thank you for that. Irene, Sebastián, do you have anything to add to that answer?
I can give the ICC perspective if you want. At least I can give you the answer on what happened until I was there a couple of years ago. I have to say two things that I think were very important. Well, first of all, the former president, Alexis Moore, and Claudia Salomon will continue. She already declared that many times. He was the first one who managed to reach pure gender parity in the court of the ICC. So for the first time, we had 88 men, 88 women. And I know how difficult it was. So kudos to that. And like, it's not just for the court, because what happens is that once these professionals finish their term at the court, they are more likely to receive arbitration appointment.
Yeah.
So this is very important. I think that Ndanga even is a vice president. We just recently appointed one of the South American vice president of the court, and she's a woman. And, because she's competent, first of all, but of course, the fact that she was appointed vice president of the ICC court, I love her already, but convinced also the other partners in the construction joint venture where we are in that had to select the arbitrator to say, okay, this woman has a certain standing internationally, even though she comes from a very small South American country. So I think at least the ICC, that's what I can speak for. I cannot speak for other institutions, but they're doing a decent job. So from a woman gender parity and ethnicity parity point of view. In addition, when the court cannot freely appoint arbitrators how they want, the cases of direct appointment are, I think, according to the last statistics, around 7 to 9% of the cases. But I have to tell you what happened to me in this 7 to 9% of cases, when it was up to us to select the arbitrators directly. The management and Alexis himself, because in the end it's the president who finishes the appointment, right? So the team and the management has to prepare the list of arbitrators, and we were always encouraged to put the same number of men and women, same level of professionality, of course, and competence. And we were very much encouraged to try to find an arbitrator that would correspond from an ethnicity point of view and background to the case where we had to appoint the tribunal. So that was done in the maximum possible extent. Now, speaking about in-house, like my perspective, what I can do now, to be very honest, in selection of outside counsel, it's difficult because we pick the law firms that we need as a law firm. We do not pick the people, to be very honest. And sometimes teams that work on the case are so big that it's true, maybe we could do something more. I have to be very honest, didn't think about it right now, but it's not that I pick the associates. I let the partners who are usually our direct contacts, they create their own team. Again, I can tell you what I've lived myself, and I can tell you that at White & Case, they have a huge attention for gender diversity and ethnicity diversity. Always had. I overheard some partners' conversation years ago, and I can confirm that this is real, not just a show off. But it's a bit difficult, I think, for in-house counsel to do that. But I think there is still space for improvement. And if anyone has proposal, I'm happy to. Instead, for selecting arbitrators, of course, we can do something because, sure, the counsel prepared the Facebook and the list of candidates, but it's in the end, it's up to the client to select. So that's certainly something we have to do. I'm trying, wherever I see parity in competence, try to go with a female candidate. I didn't have, apart from this South American case, still any occasion where I could express a preference based on ethnicity. I just didn't have the opportunity, but it's something that I personally keep in my mind, for sure. But if you ask me, something to do is continue asking the question, continue provoking people, because you continue to provoke people to think about the problem and think about potential solutions.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. It's a question we must keep on asking. Sebastián, I don't know if you've got anything to add, or whether the guys have already pretty much covered that.
Yeah, I think that my colleagues are answered perfectly to the question. I mean, from my perspective, of course, in my company, which is an American company, we have the diversity issue is something very, very important, and we have a lot of groups, internal groups, in order to promote diversity in our job. And it's I wouldn't say that it's behind us now, but I mean it's really something that is totally included in the culture of my company. But I would be a bit provocative maybe, and from my perspective, I think the real problems and that we still experience now is the practices of institutions, because of their functioning, because of the rules of appointment. They tend to favor appointments that are not always objectively justified. What I mean is that there is no reason to appoint an arbitrator only because he or she has been very active in the promotion of the set of institution, or worst case, because he or she has been defending a personal interest of employees of the institution. And I think that kind of appointment is very bad. It's very bad for arbitration reputation, but it still exists. It still exists. That's the real problem, and it's definitely not customer oriented. You know, as arbitration users, companies, they prefer to have competent and more available arbitrator nominated to decide their case, than just someone who's well connected within the arbitral community. You know, I think it's a big problem. You know, that it's just in front of us, that we, you know, how to say, it's the big elephant. You know, but we don't in the room.
In the room, yeah.
In the room, it's here, but now we say no, it doesn't exist. But I think it's still there, and I'm not saying it's disappearing yet. This is something that institution and it may be pushing by in arbitration user must keep pushing.
Yeah, well, and it sounds as though from your perspective, the institutions are not doing as much as they could. So let's keep that issue firmly on the agenda. I'm not seeing any other questions, and we are running out of time. So I'm going to thank you all very, very much. I've actually absolutely loved this session, and it's been great. It's felt like a fantastic conversation, and I hope the audience has felt that too. So Sebastián, and Maria Irene, grazie, merci, gracias, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.